up, everybody? Welcome to the Huddle on this Wednesday, the 22nd day of May. I am Ninja. With me, as always, is Tony. Tony, how's it going?
Going real well. How about yourself, brother?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. We've moved into the conference finals across the NBA and the NHL. I want to talk about that a little bit here, Tony. I want to talk about Conn Smythe markets, NBA Finals MVP markets, and I want to get into some NFL schedule talk. We talked a little bit about it last week, but that was before the actual schedule was released. We knew a few games, the international games, some primetime games early on in the schedule, but we'll dig a little bit deeper into that here momentarily.
And I've got a surprise trivia question for you coming up, Andrew, a little later on during the NFL talk. So I want you to be sweating a little bit as we lead up to that.
Okay, put me on the spot.
Yes,
I can take it. Just a reminder, we are going live every weekday. That's Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern right here on X and on YouTube, giving out best bets for all of the playoff games in the NBA and the NHL. And join us later on today. We're going to have our good friend Minty Betts on to talk about both NHL series and, of course, picks for tonight's games. We've got one more series to tip off in the NBA with the Celtics squeaking out a win last night. Holy cow, the Pacers really gave them a test. But talk to me about the NHL here, Tony, as you see Jaylen Brown. I mean, a crazy shot that he hit in the corner there to take that game. Pacers should have won that one. They turned the ball over so frequently down the stretch. It was absolutely insane. But talk to me, Tony, about these two playoff series. We did it a little bit yesterday on the live stream. But talk to me about Panthers and Rangers in the East. Updated series prices as follows. Rangers plus 130. Panthers minus 150. Over 5.5 games minus 195. Under plus 160. What do you make of this series? What do you expect? How many games? Who's coming out on top?
Yeah, I like the Rangers here, plus 130. I bet it. As I said yesterday on the live spaces, I don't like it quite as much as I like the plus 140 last series, but I still like it a lot. Just in general, by the way, with these four teams, none of them have won a Stanley Cup final since the 90s. So I think that makes these finals this Final Four a little more exciting, because if you're at any age under than 30, you've not seen these teams. I mean, maybe you were 4 or 5 years old, but nobody's a serious sports fan at that point, right? You've not been able to enjoy your team win a Stanley Cup final. So I think that makes this a little bit more exciting. I think the Star, you're more of a hockey historian than me on this, Andrew, so correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think the Stars last won in 99, Rangers in 94, and Oilers in 1990. So kind of adds a little more juice to these playoffs. But yeah, with this series, keep an eye on the injury updates. Rangers might be getting back Huddle and Wheeler. That would help with their depth situation quite a bit. The Rangers are just a funny team. We talked about it on the X Spaces yesterday. Analytically, they're not a great team, but they win.
Gav's been going on about it every day.
He's win.
Shocked that they're here.
They've been outshot in terms of shots on goal. They've been outshot by 6 goals a game in every game in the playoffs, but they've only lost 2 playoff games. They just keep winning. They're sort of defying the odds. And, they dominated during the regular season, but, 2 series in a row that they're going to be underdogs going into this. So I'm sure that puts a little bit of a chip on their shoulder as well. You may disagree with me, but I give the goaltending edge to Shesterkin here. Both goalies come into this game with a similar save percentage during the regular season, .913 and .915, but Shesterkin has stepped it up during the playoffs, .923, and Bobrovsky's actually regressed a little bit in the playoffs, .902, but he's playing pretty good as well. But I just like the Rangers' moxie at this point, and I'm happy to take them at plus 130 in this series.
Yeah, it's a tough one with the goaltending in this series, man. Like, going in, you certainly give the nod to Shesterkin, but in the last handful of games, man, he's shown, a red flag here and there. He's still elite, obviously, but I think he's given up 10 goals in his last 3 games in that series against the Canes. Bobrov's been really good. I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, right? They're both elite. They're both among the best at their position. But for me, Going into this one tonight, I kind of give the edge to Bobrovsky, man. He's just been a bit more dialed in these last handful of games anyway. What do you make about the one out west? Of course, it's Dallas, Edmonton. Stars minus 130. Oil coming back at plus 110. Similar over under for the games. Over 5.5 minus 195. Under 5.5 plus 160. This one's a tough one as far as I can tell. But what do you think here?
I like the Stars here on the money line for the series, and I like it more than I like the Rangers on the other side. They got a 3-game rest advantage. I think that's going to come in handy. Edmonton and Dallas aren't exactly close to each other, so there's going to be a lot of flying time in the air, a lot of travel time in this series. And I think later on, that extra 3 days rest that Dallas is having to start the series is going to be pretty helpful. And then when you talk about a goaltending advantage in this one, I think you'll agree with me on this one. Ottinger versus Skinner.
Skinner all day.
Get out of here. Get out of here. I got to go with Ottinger. When you talk about like recent performance, Skinner's been better than expected the last couple days because he had a couple rough spots. But how about Ottinger? 1 goal allowed in 3 of his last 4 games. He's done really well in the playoffs so far. Shortest odds for Conn Smythe at this point, which we may talk about later on in the show. He's been playing really, really well. Another injury situation, a modder here, Roope Hintz. He missed games 5 and 6 of the last series. Don't forget, he led the Stars in points per game in the playoffs last year. So getting him back after a couple games out will be huge. And then Yanni Hakanpää may be coming back later in the series as well. Certainly worth monitoring. But let's just review the Stars' resume here so far in the playoffs. 5-1 on the road against Colorado, against Vegas. They opened both series. They lost game 1 of both series, and then they lost game 1 and 2 in Vegas. So they came back. They've showed a lot of tenacity and a lot of grit. You just got to love what the Stars have done. And now they're getting likely a couple of reinforcements back before this series is over. They won 2 of 3 during the regular season against the Oilers. There's a lot to like here about the Stars, and I think that's a nice little minus 125 price.
Yeah, we've been talking about the Oilers, of course, but so top heavy, in those first couple lines, but not much depth beyond that. Insane playoffs from obviously McDavid, Draisaitl, what's the defenseman's name? Evan Bouchard, incredible scoring through the opening 2 rounds of the playoffs. So I think it's going to be a good one. It's defense versus offense. Ottinger, like you said, atop the Conn Smythe odds boards, and we will get to that here momentarily. But I think we are in store for a couple of really good, really competitive conference finals over there in the NHL. Over in the NBA, I mean, the East is a foregone conclusion, even though the Pacers gave Boston everything they had last night. Really good game, just some clutch baskets by Jaylen Brown. In particular. But over in the West, Minnesota and Dallas, we've got Minnesota minus 175. We've got Dallas plus 150. The Celtics are now minus 1,800. That's absolutely insane. We talked to our NBA guy, Chris Walder, yesterday on the live stream. He sees Minnesota winning in 7. I agree that Minnesota is going to win this series, but I don't think it goes past 6. So screw it. I'll say Wolves in 6 games in this series, which is out there at plus 400. We addressed it a little bit yesterday. It is one of the league's best defenses in Minnesota, one of the league's best defenses against ISO basketball, which is what Dallas wants to do with either Luka or Kyrie Irving. They want to play that ISO style basketball. Minnesota has just too many good defenders, either on the perimeter or at the basket. So I don't know. I think this one could be a good one. It's certainly going to be better than Boston, Indiana. So I'll take Minnesota in 6, which is out there at plus 400 on the NBA side of things.
Ninja, if you're not betting this one, if you're just a casual fan, does everybody want to see Minnesota in the finals just because it's a bit of a Cinderella story? Is that kind of what everybody's secretly rooting for?
I sure as hell do. Just because they've been the best team in the playoffs for my money. I know the Celtics, they've only lost, 2 games so far in 2 rounds, but they have some flaws. I think Minnesota, what they did to Phoenix was incredibly impressive. And now they defeat the defending champs in a 7-game series in which the games were the wins were all pretty much one-sided, like a lot of double-digit wins in that one, but just great basketball. Anthony Edwards, really elevated his game in that series. Karl Anthony Towns stepped up. That was one of the things I earmarked before that series on the live streams. It was the fact that Minnesota causes Denver mismatch problems, whether it's Cat or whether it's Naz Reid. Denver just didn't really have an answer for that. So it's just been fun. I hope it's Minnesota, Boston in the final. I'll still take Dallas. I think Dallas could give Boston some headaches in the NBA Finals as well. But I do think it's going to be Minnesota that comes out of the West.
And if it's Minnesota, Boston, how are you feeling about Minnesota's chances against Boston? That's tough, right?
Man, oh man. I mean, the old adage is you got to take your lumps in the NBA. You got to lose before you can win. But I'm not sold with this Celtics team, man. I know they have some star power with Jason Tatum, with Jaylen Brown, with Holiday. But they've shown some weaknesses. There have been some red flags there in both rounds of the playoffs. They dropped a game to an injury-laden Heat team. They dropped a game to the Cavs, who didn't have Jared Allen. It was close when Mitchell was out and Karis LeVert was out. So there's some things there about Boston that give me pause. I'll have to see what those series price markets are if we do indeed get to that point. But it's going to be very, very interesting nonetheless. I wanted to bring this one up from Mitch because this is a very good question. Our guy, Mitch Bannon. Hey, fellas. Which team across the 4 NHL/NBA conference finals needs a game one win the most? We already know the Celtics took game one. I don't think that would have been an answer to this question regardless. I do think it potentially comes from the ice, though, Tony. Pick those 2 NHL series. Which one of those teams needs to come out of the gates fast?
That's a fantastic question. Let me go through these. Stars, I'm going to knock off because we've seen them come back, as I said earlier, from down one. So they're out. So I think the Rangers. I think because a lot of people aren't expecting them to win this series. If you go down 0-1 or you go down 0-2, you start to get in your head a little bit. You start to lose confidence and start to believe some of that hype against you, the hype on the Panthers. And so I think, especially being at home, the Rangers need to at least split these first 2, and going 2-0 would be really nice for them. I don't know how realistic that is, but they need to at least win one of the first 2. So that game 1 for them is probably the most important.
Yeah, that's fair. And I would say just from the series that's tipping off tonight, I would say Dallas needs it the most. If they go down 1-0 to this hungry, aggressive, very good Minnesota Timberwolves team, then that series could be done and dusted. And speaking of series, Tony, talk to me a little bit about series price markets and betting these things. Maybe there's people out there that are watching that haven't dabbled into series markets before. Are there any tips or tricks or words of wisdom that you'd have for bettors that might be new to this market?
Yeah, for sure. First thing, these markets are fluid, so they're going to update after every game. And I know that that's kind of common sense, but I've said it before. I think we sometimes forget that. So let's use Dallas, who we've talked about a couple times so far. The Stars, they've lost game 1 the last 2 series. So if you like them for the series, I don't think it's a terrible idea to wait until after game 1 to bet it, because these sports books often overcorrect and they sort of overreact to a game 1 loss. So now that could backfire. If the Stars win game 1, the odds are going to go in the other direction and you're going to regret it and say, Tony's an idiot. I wish I would have just bet it right from the start. But it's something to consider depending on your level of conviction in the first game. We talked about a team like the Rangers, who are going to be getting a couple guys back from injury, we think. So not quite sure how they're going to fit into the rotation. Maybe these guys are rusty. So if you like the Rangers, maybe you wait a game to see how it plays out. So that's just something to consider and realize that these odds are fluid. You don't have to bet the series odds before game 1 just because they're there. You can always sit back, wait to see how things unfold, and then go from there. The other thing that I think is important to consider is comparing these series prices with the finals prices. And now we live in a day and age with sports betting where we're lucky. I don't know if you saw this, Andrew, but some of the books have come out with potential finals matchups that aren't even set in stone yet. So we can already see what the books are looking at for finals matchups down the road. And you can take that in mind and consider like the rollover method that we talked about so much during the college basketball season for March Madness, right? With these 2 games left, and you can kind of do some of these odds at the different sports books and see if I like the Stars to win it all, which I do, by the way, am I better off with that Stars futures ticket price? Or if you like the Rangers at 4-1, are you better off rolling that over and taking that money from this round into the finals and then going about it that way? So just do that math. Don't rush into a decision and say, yeah, I like the Rangers to win it all. Rangers win it all. Play around with it a little bit and see what mathematically is going to be your best option there.
And then talk to me a little bit about specifically NHL here. Stanley Cup futures markets, Tony. It's tightly knit as we sit here today. 94 Rangers, speak of the devil. Look at Moose. What an absolute legend. Sorry, Dallas plus 230, Edmonton plus 240, Florida plus 270, and the Rangers there at plus 350. What do you like if you were to bet that today? Like, are you sticking with Dallas?
Yeah, I really think Dallas is going to win it, but certainly shop around. All those numbers that were up there, we always say shop around. I've seen plus 400 on the Rangers too, so
Yeah.
you can get an even better number on them. I don't think that's terrible at this point. But yeah, Stars and Rangers, I'm kind of all in on those two teams at this point.
And then over in the NBA, not as tight potentially as we saw in the Stanley Cup futures markets. We've got
Typical NBA, right?
right. I mean, we've got Celtics minus 160, Mini at plus 250, Dallas 5-1, and then Indiana, of course, a game down at 35-1. Nothing crazy. I think, gun to my head, I'd go with Minnesota here. The Celtics are a weak team, sort of like I said. I can't see them, winning the whole thing. And if they do, certainly hats off. But right now, minus 160 after scraping by Indiana in game one, it's just another red flag. So Minnesota plus 250 would be my pick there. And then let's look at Conn Smythe real quick.
Ninja, real quick. So I'm not an NBA guy, but I just got to ask, is it crazy to think about 35-1 on the Pacers? I know the Celtics are this powerhouse, but since they just forced overtime last night, maybe the Pacers are more in this series than people think. 35-1 is juicy and I think at least worth a discussion, no?
I just felt like last night was their chance to steal a game. And if they win that game, I mean, obviously we're not sitting here talking about them being 35-1, but if they win that game one, that makes things awfully interesting and the momentum. But how deflating, how disheartening to go to OT, to let a lead, to blow the lead like they did, and then to sort of let that game slip through their fingers while they were so close. Some sloppy basketball as well. That was basically the look of every
look at those
Indiana
faces.
Pacers fan.
Look at those faces.
As Jaylen Brown hit that shot. So, I mean, on paper, it looks great. But this is the NBA. And a 1 seed in the Celtics, in the driver's seat now, that's tough to come back from. The one thing you give to hockey is that a one-zip lead isn't the end of the world. But in this series, Celtics-Indiana, it's pretty close. It's pretty darn close. So,
by the way,
I just want to talk about Conn Smythe real quick. Market's interesting here. I mean, we've talked about a few of the candidates here at the top of the leaderboard. Jake Ottinger, we said. Connor McDavid, Shesterkin there as well. Then Barkov for the Panthers, Draisaitl, Matthew Tkachuk, Heiskanen, and so on and so on. Anything grab your attention from there?
Well, I got one that's not even on the list because it's so far down the board. Mika's advantage ad 30-1. Remember, Conn Smythe is considering what's happened throughout the whole playoffs, not just the Stanley Cup Finals. And he's got 14 points so far. Probably not the MVP of his team right now necessarily, but there's a path. If the Rangers get there and he has a dominant Stanley Cup Finals, I don't think that's too crazy. But my top two picks, I got to like Wyatt Johnson and Ottinger. Because I like Dallas so much. So those are my three. Ottinger and Johnston if you want to play it a little more conservative. And if you want to get a little creative and have a long shot, Mika at 30-1.
And then over in the NBA, Jason Tatum plus 115 sitting on top there. Ant Edwards 3-1. Lucas 6-1. Jaylen Brown plus 750. Derek White took a big turn. I forget what he was yesterday. Steve was telling me about this. He's now 16-1. But if Minnesota is going to win the NBA Finals, how do you not pick Ant at 3-1? But then also Karl Anthony Towns, Cat is there at around 30-1. So that's some pretty good value as well on the NBA board. Yeah, Steve, 28-1 Derek White was. So a big pivot there.
When
So
I
yeah,
just saw those looks on the Pacers' faces, by the way, it reminded me of one of my all-time favorite sports highlights. Do you remember when Larry Bird was coaching the Pacers and Reggie
oh
Miller
yeah,
hit a game-winning three and he
yeah,
had just dead face? It was like he's just like nothing.
yeah.
That's one of my favorite reactions in sports history.
Yep, Larry Bird. I mean, he wrote the book on those clutch shots, did he not?
He wasn't
So
impressed.
he's been there and done that. Let's talk a little NFL, unless you've got something else you want to discuss on the NHL side of things.
Let's go
Yeah,
NFL.
well, Steve's going hard with the sound effects. I do want to talk real quick about Justin Jefferson because there is a little smoke around some of the rumors surrounding this guy. Isn't attending OTAs, which are voluntary, so it's not the craziest thing, but the contract stuff is getting pretty spicy with him. There are a lot of rumors linking him with the New York Jets. What do you make of all this?
It's intriguing. You mentioned the contract drama. There's also sources that have seen him near the Jets facility. So
Yeah.
he not only is he not at OTAs, he's not in the same state as his team, and he's really close to the Jets facility. So the smoke is, if there's a trade on the horizon, he may need to negotiate a contract with the Jets in order to make the trade happen, and that might be why he's in New York right now, allegedly. So let's see what comes of this. I say if the Jets land this dude, they are a top 3 or 4 team to win the Super Bowl. I already love them at 20-1. You know how much I love the Jets. We're going to talk about their schedule later in this show.
Yeah.
Soft. Like, this team is set up for success. And then you add a number 1 wide receiver to a team that really doesn't have any weaknesses. Like, it's starting to get pretty exciting for the Jets, and Justin Jefferson on top is the cherry on top. And by the way, the Jets play the Vikings like week 6 or 7 or so. So that could be pretty interesting if that trade did take place.
Yeah, Jefferson spotted. I can't remember where the Jets sort of camp is, somewhere in New Jersey, but he was there like 3 minutes away or something. Yeah, which is certainly weird. So, of course, Jets Twitter, et cetera, picked up on that.
What do you think it would take to get him? Like, it's got to be a first-round pick and more. I hope the Jets wouldn't trade like a Sauce Gardner, a big player for player swap. But if we're talking just draft picks, like a 1 and another solid pick, I think would maybe get it done if Jefferson is that unhappy and they feel like they can't get him under contract. But
what are their odds to win the AFC East?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's 20-1 to win the Super Bowl. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Very interesting. It'd be very interesting to dig into that market as well, because you're right. Like, as it sits here on paper, that potential 53-man roster is going to look pretty darn good.
Yep.
Also, I wanted to talk about I shouldn't laugh, but I want to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, because I don't think anybody's having a worse offseason than the Kansas City Chiefs. Rashee Rice alone has been the headline maker in the offseason. Well, him and Harrison Butker, I should say. But then a couple other players arrested for marijuana possession. So just really not a great offseason for the Super Bowl champs. Seriously?
I mean, I don't think it's going to affect them when the season starts. It's certainly not a good look. You remember a couple of years ago, they had the legal drama with Andy Reid's son too. Really unfortunate.
Yeah. Forgot about that, actually.
Yeah, they're no strangers to this stuff. They seem to bounce back from it. But here's my conspiracy theory, Ninja. This is why Taylor Swift is here, to take all the attention away from all the drama that the Chiefs seem to have every offseason. We just need to just talk about Taylor Swift in the media instead of, all their players getting arrested and saying stupid things and people laughing at them, et cetera. It's perfect PR.
It's been a tough one, though, man, because Rashee Rice was a dude that sort of stepped up, especially down the stretch there, in a very thin position for that Chiefs team. Started to make some plays here and there. But yeah, I don't know.
And he's had 2 incidents, right? There's obviously the driving one, and then he had the second incident.
The nightclub thing, man. Very weird. Very,
Yeah.
very, very crappy.
Weeks
For
apart. And then you wonder like what else is going there. I don't want to speculate drugs, etc.
no.
But it's like if you have two incidents that close together, there may be other stuff going on that's leading to that type of behavior. So who knows?
AFC East, Buffalo plus 160. The Jets plus 190, Miami 2-1, and
Love that.
the Patriots plus 2300.
When is the last time you've seen division odds plus 2300 for anybody preseason? That's wow.
That's the tough one.
Yeah.
Especially the Pats. We're so used to them being at
Yeah.
or near the top. But let's talk about the schedule. Of course, we go live with the Huddle on Wednesday. The schedule came out Wednesday night, so after the fact. But we did a little prognosticating. We talked about teams that we thought, could fly under the radar, being, potential either win total bets or just week in, week out spread bets, and then teams that might be overrated. So we'll dig into all that. But our good friend Ben Fox, Tony, tweeted out some really interesting nuggets about the schedule and the lines that have been put out for their regular season games. So bear with me here. The Niners favored in the most games as it stands right now, 17. The Pats and Panthers are the only two teams to be underdogs in all 17 games. The Falcons are dogs in 2 of their first 3 games. And then after week 3, they are favored in 13 of 14. The Jets are favored in 14 games, which is the most they've ever been favored in franchise history. The Broncos are favored in just 2 games. This one's super weird, but the Dolphins are favored in each of their first 7 games, but then only in 3 of their last 10. Those are from our guy, Ben Fox. Make sure you follow Ben on X at BFox22. That's BFAWKES 22. Anything jump out at you on schedule release day?
Yeah, for sure. I love Warren Sharp's post that I look forward to every
Yes.
year on Twitter with the net rest advantage. And if you don't know what net rest advantage is, it's basically, if you're playing on a Monday night and someone's got a full week of rest, you're -1 right there because you've got one less day of rest. And then you add those up through the course of the season. And the Ravens are the big winners this year.
Yes.
They have a +16 rest advantage. And according to Warren Sharp, that's the best rest advantage since 1990. And he says likely the largest ever. 49ers -21. So they're kind of getting the short straw here. 2 years in a row, by the way. They've had the worst rest advantage. Hey, it didn't impact them last year. They got to the Super Bowl. But they've got a tough schedule, man. Chiefs and Cowboys back-to-back weeks with both of those teams coming off of a bye week. That's a tough draw for the 49ers. But how about this one? The Chargers, -10 rest advantage. That's the 6th worst, by the way. And they have the earliest bye in week 5. So they're kind of getting 2 different shafts there. And if you're curious about the other week 5 buys, it's the Lions, Eagles, and Titans. You never want to see that when the schedules come out because you start getting tired. The injuries start piling up late in the season, and you're not getting a break unless you get that first round bye. So the other one was the Colts, who are a team that you and I both had on our list of considerations for sleeper teams.
Yeah,
they're -17 for their net rest advantage. So tough draw for them as well.
According to Sharp Football Analysis, the easiest schedules belong to the Falcons, Chargers, Bears, Jets, and Saints. The hardest schedules, Tony, belong to the Steelers, Pats, Browns, Ravens, and Vikings. What do you make of any of that?
Yeah, with the Browns right at the top of the list, man, we've talked a little bit about Deshaun Watson, but it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of a start he gets off to. I like what you said about the Falcons being underdogs in 2 of their first 3 games. How much pressure is going to be on Kirk Cousins?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can say Penix is looking over his shoulder, but he's there. And if you go 1-2 and Michael Penix is there, that's an interesting story, perhaps midway.
Are you
the
pulling
season.
the shoot on if you're the Falcons and you're 1-2?
Not at 1-2, but as you start to think about it, you start to say, "Hey, what if there's 2 or 3 more losses? What if we're under 500 halfway through the season? What if this season doesn't go how we think?" I think the Falcons are going to be okay. I like them this season, but it's worth talking about that really tough stretch to the season. On the other side, the Jets, a team who I talked about last week, why I love them so much. I won't get into all those details again about why I love them so much. So they've got the 49ers week 1, Monday night, obviously tough game. The next 3 games might be versus 3 of the worst teams in the NFL. They go against the Titans, the Patriots, and Broncos. 2 of those games are at home. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Jets are going to be 3-1 after 4 games. Then who do they have? Vikings, very winnable game, especially if they get Justin Jefferson and steal him from the Vikings, right? Then they've got the Bills, who I'm down on. I don't think the Bills are going to be the same powerhouse this year. Steelers, Pats. It's possible. It's conceivable the Jets could be 7-1 after their first 8 games of the season. And they've got a whole bunch of primetime games this year. It's almost like the NFL is building them up to be a showcase team. I think the NFL wanted them to be a showcase team last year
100%.
with Rodgers coming to New York, first time playing a game without the Packers. And then we saw how that went week 1. It blew up in their face. I think the NFL is determined to make the Jets a primetime team. And maybe that's why they got such a soft start to their schedule.
Yeah, potentially. That's a very good point. Were the Jets your under the radar team that we talked about last week?
Yeah, they're mine. Colts were on the list. I don't think we can say the Texans are under the radar anymore. The cat's out of the bag on this one. So, yeah, the Jets were number 1 for me.
And who was your potentially overrated team?
That was the Bills.
Right. Yeah.
That was the Bills. Yep.
Mine, Tony, my under the radar team for 2024 was the New Orleans Saints, and specifically in win totals markets because they were 7.5. Now we know the schedule, and they've got it tough in 5 weeks. Okay, they open against Carolina, sure, whatever. But then they're at Dallas versus Philly, at Atlanta, and then at KC. I'm no mathematician, but that looks like a 1-4 start, right?
And I think they should win week 1, but you better win week 1. That's going to be a high pressure game with those next 3 games on your schedule. Absolutely, yeah.
So, let's say they go 1-4, but then, okay, Tampa Bay and Denver at home. Okay. At the Chargers, at the Panthers. Sure. Versus Falcons, versus Cleveland, versus the Rams, at the Giants, versus Washington, at Green Bay, versus the Raiders, and then at Tampa Bay to finish things off. That, it's not the worst, but there are some hurdles there that the Saints have to overcome. We talked about their defense. It's already ready-made to be one of the best defenses in the NFL, potentially, if they can build on the momentum from last year, plus a couple good signings that they made. But yeah, I'm worried, I think, about that one. That I don't know. That's a tough one.
Yeah, and the Saints, you always have to worry about them injury-wise. Like, is Kamara going to be healthy? They've got several players who are always banged up and things of that nature. So, yeah, interesting team to watch. Did you see the Sunday night game for week 1? Really good one.
What is it?
It's Lions-Rams.
Oh, yeah.
And we already talked about how good the Thursday night game is, and now that Friday night international game and the Monday night game is good. This is a quartet of 4 really good primetime games week 1. The NFL did it right there for sure.
I think I saw a tweet earlier today that said Jared Goff is the best spread bet in week 1 from the quarterback position. I think he's 7-0 against the spread.
Nice. I didn't even know that. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, just real quick on Goff. I got to say this because you know how I always talk about how Goff is like not good outdoors, especially when there's weather, precipitation, because he has small hands. He's got a good no, it's true. You laugh, but it's true, man. His numbers when there's snowing or raining are not good. And so he has a really favorable schedule. He's not outside a lot. He doesn't have like these snowy games in Buffalo later in the season. So if you want to look at Jared Goff as like an MVP pick because of this schedule, I think that is worth a consideration for sure.
MVP pick. Okay.
Yep. I mean, in that offense, he's super comfortable in that offense now.
Yeah.
I think the Lions defense is improving, but still not elite. So they'll probably also give up some points, which will actually help him put up more points on offense and put up higher numbers. So yeah, Goff for MVP with that soft schedule is absolutely worth consideration.
I want to finish the show off today talking about Survivor because you had a great run last year. And of course, people are starting to talk about it and get into survivor mode. I just want to address this one real quick from Mitch. Would you take Caleb Williams versus the field in a head-to-head offensive rookie of the year market? Any thoughts on that? Have you even studied the rookie of the year markets yet?
Not too closely, but my gut is telling me I would not take Caleb Williams. I would rather have the field. There's just
I
too
think I
many.
agree.
Yeah, too many options. And although Caleb Williams obviously has the best pedigree, obviously that's why he's the number one pick. And let's be honest, we've talked about Chicago's a nice place to be in terms of the weapons and that defense, and the team is headed in the right direction. But still, there's just so many options there that, yeah, I would take the field. And how many times have we seen these quarterbacks come out and we get excited about them and they have terrible rookie seasons? So I don't, I yeah, that's on the table as well. So I'll take the field.
We just watched it last year with Bryce Young,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Like plus Caleb Williams. I have sort of walked back my negativity towards him, and that was not because of him. It's because of USC quarterbacks in the NFL. But I'm sort of in on the Bears. I do think he has a pretty good situation with the receivers that he does. And they drafted Rome Odunze later on in that first round. So the Bears, there's something interesting going there, but it's year one. So we'll have to see what happens. We've got go ahead.
If you could find me odds of him versus the other quarterbacks, I think that gets a little more reasonable. But when you start throwing out all the really good wide receivers that came out, not just in the first round, even like the second round, there's so many choices that, yeah, you got to take the field there.
I mean, we got Jaden Daniels plus 500, Marvin Harrison Jr. plus 900, Malik Neighbors 12-1, Xavier Worthy 20-1, Rome Odunze 25-1, Bo Nix is there 12-1. Drake May 20-1. I don't think he stands a chance. Our boy Pearsall plus 5,000. Can you imagine? Imagine if there's no Ayuk and he gets more reps and more snaps and he starts to produce. Oh,
perhaps
baby.
a Puka Nakua type season.
Exactly. So it's going to be interesting. I do feel like the offensive rookies this year, we've got some ballers this year that have come out. So it's going to be interesting to see. Also interesting is going to be Survivor. I want to talk Survivor strategy with you. Any thoughts on strategy, your approach to 2024? Where do you sit right now? Have you made any moves? What's going on?
Yeah, man, with Survivor, it's all about zigging while other people are zagging. And what I like to do, Andrew, is I like to pick a couple games that I think other people are going to be attracted to that I consider landmines that are risky. And I did this twice last year. It worked out for me in one example, and I'll share an example where it didn't work out. So the Giants were playing the Bills, and even though the Giants are an inferior team, I decided, oh, by the way, with this up on the screen right here, this is from survivoratlas.com. If you're not using a tool like this, you're doing it wrong. Like, you've got to have a grid or a matrix like this where you can organize things easily. As soon as you pick a team, you can, the red line goes through it, so you don't have to worry about them later on. Those green boxes are telling you which games have a higher point spread for the favorites, and you can sort them by, the highest point spread on top. So use a tool like this, like I said, or else you're doing it wrong. But in terms of identifying those games, last year, Giants-Bills, Brian Daboll against the Bills, his old team. I'm like, wow, the Bills are going to be a big favorite in this game. But I think the Giants are going to have a really good chance because it's Daboll, his old team. And it almost worked out for me. The Bills, if you remember that game, the Bills ended up barely squeaking it out. The other one that really helped me was, that I was high on the Texans, as were you last year. So I didn't fade them in Survivor last year. Sure enough, week 3, Jaguars, Texans, 0-2 Texans knocks out 40% of the field. So that's what I like. That's how I like to spend my time this time of year, is identifying those games that look juicy to other people, but I'm like, I see a path where this could actually get ugly and knock a bunch of people out.
So have you identified any games for next season that you think might be those landmine type of games that you should be avoiding?
Yeah, I've got one week 1. Let me know what you think of this.
Okay.
Arizona at Buffalo. We talked about a 7-point spread. Buffalo is a 7-point favorite. We've talked about how Buffalo's wide receiver room is completely new. You got one less preseason game to play with. So maybe there's going to be a chemistry issue with those wide receivers and Josh Allen. And then on the other side, you've got a Cardinals team who's feisty. Remember, they beat the Cowboys last year. That was one of the biggest upsets in all of Survivor for the entire season, was when the Cardinals upset Dallas. I think that was in week 3 as well. And so the Cardinals could be feistier on week 1 than people think. And I'm not taking Buffalo week 1, but I think a lot of people will.
I kind of like that one. You and I both post-draft have talked about the fact that Arizona might be a sneaky good team this year. They drafted really, really well. The NFC West, you know, we talked about the Niners' schedule. Are they going to regress? Where does Seattle sit? There's a few wins there for Arizona to be had. So a very, very interesting team there. Anything else you want to talk about Survivor before we sign off here?
That's it, man. I'm just sick. All my friends are making fun of me because I'm still making paths right now. I'm like sitting at the pool on the weekends and playing with that grid that you saw up on the screen. And I can't help myself, man. As soon as that schedule came out, I started looking at those things. So that's how I'll be spending a lot of my time this summer for sure.
I am totally here for it. I loved living vicariously through you last year. So I can't wait to see what 2024 has in store. Keep it locked with OddsShark. And join us later today, 5 p.m. Eastern. We're going to break down tonight's 2 games with our favorite bets. And we're going to be joined by Minty Bets on today's stream. So don't miss that right here on YouTube and on X. Thank you so much for watching or listening if you're on the podcast platform. And we'll check you next week right here on the Huddle. Thanks for watching.